Hey, I'm Ossie from Three Monkey Solderless, home of the world's best cables for your pedal board. DC, AC, got it right for once. All right, so check us out at the link below, threemonkeysolderless.com. All right, so we're back on it, back on the chase. Wanted to try something theoretical, and as always, I'm not doing any I don't know even what you would call it. I'm not doing any pre-gaming or any pre-show or any sort of like tests to see whether this stuff is going to work or not. We're just sort of flying. You're seeing it as I'm seeing it. So what I thought about doing today was looking at something that was a thought that was provoked by a screenshot that was sent to me by Tim O'Keefe. And if you haven't seen Tim doing videos, doing, the tone chase in parallel with me, he's on YouTube, Tim O'Keefe, right? And his tones are just retarded. They're ridiculous. You have to watch it, especially like to me, his women and children first stuff is like, it's spooky. It's very spooky as to how close it is. So check him out too, and give him some thumbs up, give him some love over there. All right. So what Tim sent me, all right, we were talking about like waveforms and, different things and possibilities of what we're hearing and what could be and all that kind of stuff. And he sent me a screenshot of Running with the Devil, one of the isolated tracks of an EQ sort of frequency analysis, right? Just like a plot of the frequencies on a graph, and shot it, sent to me on the phone, and I was like, wow. And he pointed out something to me, which was interesting. It's magic marker time again, but we're going to look at the actual screenshot. But I want to kind of like, maybe we should do the screenshot first. I don't know. But anyway, what was interesting was that there was like this waveform, right, of his sort of guitar sound that looks sort of like this. And let's say right here was, I don't know, we're going to say somewhere around here was 1K. All right. And then somewhere around here, my memory is going to fail me because I haven't actually looked at it today. The memory would be, it's somewhere like around like, I don't know. You know what? Let me take a look, because I do have the picture here so I could take a look at it, because I don't want to really mess it all up. Yeah, there it is. Yeah, so it was somewhere around like 10K. Okay, so it was like a pretty substantial drop off going to 10K, and then right here was like something that looked like this. Right, so that's some interesting stuff. So we were talking about what this little shelf could be, and why is it there? There's, there's a couple of possibilities for that. But the one that occurred to me and Tim would be, what this could be, because you don't usually see a filter that creates this kind of it'd have to be pretty powerful. You could do it, but would create this kind of a squash down with such a sharp curve, such a sharp turn right here, right? A transition. The Q on this would be really, really unique. So what I thought of immediately was like, and I think Tim was thinking the same thing, was what if this was two images, sort of in a sense superimposed upon one another. So that would explain it. So one image would be this image right here, right? And we'll make this double fat, right? So you can see this would be like, that would be the greenback. And then the DI would be like that. It's possible. So the DI wouldn't even be really heard in this area. It would present a little bit of an extra boost in the areas where the two images, so to speak, the two sources, the greenback and the DI overlapped, but at a certain point, all you'd be left with is the DI, and you would no longer see this in the frequency graph, right? This would all be gone, and that would be the image you would be left with. So is that evidence for the DI in the track? I think so. I think that's evidence for the track. Now, what I proposed to do was to create a little bit of an experiment to move things around and see how that works inside of GarageBand. So to start off, I loaded up. We're doing all right. We'll go through the signal chain here. Let me put on the cans. Hopefully you guys could hear what I was doing. I didn't have these cans on, which was kind of goofy. So anyway, so signal chain and what you're going to be hearing when you get into GarageBand. So once again, we're going to be using the white guitar, right, with the custom Seymour Duncan in there, which is an Alnico like 13K-ish pickup. And we're going straight in from the chord into the marshmallow. And we've got it into channel 1. And we're going to turn channel 1, obviously, all the way the hill up. And we're going to also, everything's got to be on gag here, right? So everything's on 10. And then we're running into the aux stomp. And what I did this time was I split the DI and the greenback into left and right. So that way it could be isolated from one another. So on the greenback side, you're just going to hear a greenback, and then we can add in one or the other. So they're kind of, it's a pure thing. So we can see if we can recreate that image or some reasonable facsimile thereof in GarageBand. So, all right. So before we do that, well, let's go into this screenshot of the actual waveform that I'm talking about. So let's go into that. Okay, so this is the screenshot of the waveform that Tim sent me. And let me get this out of the way. Okay, there we go. So we can see that this is the waveform that I was talking about, right? And then you have this cliff and then this shelf. All right, and there is information in the shelf. So I could kind of let it run. Unfortunately, for some reason, I don't think this lets you hear what's going on, but let's see what happens. Yep, it does. Okay. You can see it's not hiss. All right. So now some thoughts would be, okay, that could just be microphone hiss in a sense, or just, static shot noise, white noise, whatever you want to call it. But it's reactive to the sound, right? So you can see how they're like right there. You can see this peak here. If this was just white noise, that wouldn't be there. All right. So how is this happening with such a sharp sort of like drop off? I mean, it is possible that there's a filter that can do that, but to me, it makes more sense again that behind this gray is another signal that's the DI. And once it leaves where the greenback no longer, produces any information, it magically appears, right? So this is just the DI and this is the greenback. So let's see if we can get into GarageBand. Use your powers of memory to remember what this image sort of looks like. All right. And then we're going to get into GarageBand right now. So let's go there. All right. So we're up in GarageBand, and I've opened up a little project and just kind of put some basic stuff in. And it's based upon the last video with the Van Halen 2 room sound. So this is like the DI theory. That's what we've named it. So what we're going to do is we're going to rename this track, right? Because we're going to have two tracks. One has the DI. The other one is the greenback. So let's rename this track. This is going to be the greenback. So that's just greenback. At least it should be. So let me grab the guitar and let's see what is actually, and we got to cut all this crap off that we had on. Right? Hang on. I did need to put on this. Okay. So now that's going to help with my voice. There we go. So let's go back to this. All right, so on the master, we have nothing. On the regular track, and then we're in 3. So let's see what this is. Yep. Yeah, it was tuned for Running with the Devil. Who knew? All right, so now we need another track with the duplicate settings. And we're going to rename this track. Rename track. It's going to be called the D period I period. So that's the DI, right? The direct input. And I believe that should be on 4 because this is 3. So 4 should have the DI on it. So let's listen to just the DI. So this is what your guitar sounds like, in your guitar amp sounds like in reality, the full bandwidth. The Celestians, they're a filter. So this is all the information. All right, so that's pretty fuzzy, right? And a lot of top end. So let's look at the differences and how they appear in terms of, all right, so we're going to need the channel EQ. Okie doke, we turn on the channel EQ. And we're going to turn on the analyzer. So this shows the frequencies. All right, so in our previous picture that we said, around 10K is where, you know, everything just kind of dropped off, really, you know? So let's listen to just the greenback here. Or maybe not. Turn on the greenback, dummy. Okay, there it is. All right, let's bring this up. You can see ain't nothing here. All right. It's sort of at 5K, it just takes a nosedive. Okay, now let's look at the frequency response of the DI. All right, so this is your DI frequency response. Let's see what that looks like. So you can see there is information out past 10K. Now, if I were to just try to exemplify that, right? So I could just, let's say, isolate everything here, right? You know what? Let's do it on the actual track. So we're on the DI right now. So let's get the channel EQ up on that track. Okay. Okay. Why is it working on my voice too? That doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make any sense. We're on the Teddy's track. There we go. Let's look at the master. Let's turn that off. Okay. So let's go back again to the track. This should not affect my voice, I don't think. God. All right, put on the filter here. Okay, there we go. So what I'm going to try to do is raise the levels up so we can actually see the information that's up high on the DI. Okay. All right, so I'm going to bring that up. So you can see all this information here, right? Out past 10K. Right? So the combination of the two, I think, is what we're really looking for here, in a sense. And, you know, this is all fast and dirty with what we're doing. So, you know, all of this can be improved on and sculpted a little bit better. But I just want to see these two images together. Okay, so now we have the greenback and the DI together. And let's see what that looks like on the sum together on the analyzer. I don't know why I had that thing going that way. Okay, so let's see what this looks like. Come on, analyzer, come on. Right, so all of the DI's information that we saw before that was down here is now just part of the main signal. So you don't see that. It just sort of blends in to the regular signal. But it does create a filter, right? Because anytime you put two signals together that are not identical, they're going to compete for bandwidth. And where they're in phase, they're going to help one another. And when they're not in phase, one of them is going to win. And one's going to get beat down a little bit. So depending upon the amplitude of the signals, out of phase signals, one will prevail more so than the other, but it will, in a sense, modify that signal. Now, when you have a complex signal, let's say like my voice that has a ton of these valleys and peaks in it, which are separated by distances, right? You can see the distances between all of this. And then you combine that with an out of phase signal or a slightly out of phase signal. And the two will now work against each other and create another image that's different than both of those. And that's sort of referred to as comb filtering. It's like, you know, the broken comb, right? There's spaces between there. So a comb filter is one that has spaces between them, between where the drops or modifications are going to be. But it's fixed in the sense that, or it's not fixed. It's variable because the two signals are out of phase with one another, but continuously changing as the frequency of the guitar changes, as it decays and all that. So let's listen to this again. And then we can vary the amount of the DI versus the greenback. Now I'm just going to do it on the aux stomp on the knobs, so you can sort of see the effect that has. See how much more that's coming up in the top range? And then I'll turn it down and it'll disappear. Right? It's all gone. Bring it back up. Now see how different the body of the waveform looks as you bring in the DI as well? So there you're kind of seeing the effect of a comb filter. It's accentuating certain places and it's sort of, beating down certain areas as well. It's also providing information in places of reinforcement, right? So it adds a complexity to it, as well as a complexity to areas where it's attenuating. So I think there's some validity here for the DI, or some proof for the DI being in those tracks. I mean, I can hear it. I've always thought it's there, but, kind of showing it on a graph, on that frequency analyzer, really kind of makes me believe it more so, right? So if I was using the same equalizer as Tim was using, I think we would have, a better comparison, apples to apples and oranges to oranges. So yeah, I think that's a pretty good, a clue that the DI is part of that sound, right? So let's get out of here and we'll go back into reality and we'll sort of like discuss it and finish up everything. All right, so let's get back to reality. All right, so we're back in the room, and I think that was a little interesting. I think it does offer evidence that there's a DI signal in there. I think it does. I think it's hiding in behind the regular signal, right? So when we had, the DI running through, we got that shelf out past 10K, and we were able to also kind of add some interesting information to all of these areas as well, right? With the comb filtering effect taking effect on the waveform as the fingers of the other frequency work this way as well as this way, right? And since they're slightly out of time with one another, they create this interesting effect. So that may bear fruit. I still would have to think of how to sort of how the signal chain would work in that case, where we're going to sort of split out the DI from the greenback beforehand, before we go into like the room sound and everything else. I think the best idea to do that may be inside of the stomp, because it does allow you to sort of balance the two and then run mono out. So what you can do is inside the stomp software, you can adjust the balance of where you want these two microphones or inputs or sources to go. So in this case, I had one panned hard left and one panned hard right. So that way I could isolate the DI from the greenback. Now, if a balance is found, right, when we were doing sort of like figuring out how much DI to use and how much greenback to use, that can be set inside of the aux to present a mono signal that's a sum of those two in a balance that's predetermined. So that may be the next thing to do, is to once again sort of set the panning inside of the software, which is controlled by the iPhone, to get the sound right, lock it in, and then we can sort of bring it into GarageBand as a mono source that we can then make room sound as well as EQ, as well as room plus chamber, going for sort of like the Van Halen 1 sound. And it may have applications beyond that. So I think that's some interesting stuff for today. Got a lot going on, I'm telling you. I was losing my mind this week. There was just so much stuff to do and so many things going on, and it was just a tough week to get through without having your brain sort of in the red line, just full goose bozo the whole fucking week. You know, your brain just starts racing. So I sort of need a little bit of time maybe to decompress that. But I'll be back next week, I'm sure, or maybe before then. So anyway, so that's good for the week. Once again, check out Tim. Also, you got to check out Martin. So Martin Smith, right? He does a bunch of Van Halen stuff like we do. And he got a marshmallow and he put up a video recording at his studio with it. And, you know, this gives you all kinds of different takes of different ears. It's sort of, you know, getting back into, you know, the philosophy, like Cartesian sort of stuff. It's like, what is reality? Is it out there or is it in here? I think it's depending on the person. I think my reality is not out there. But you got to check out Martin and you got to check out Tim and see what they're doing. And I think it's really cool that, you know, we're kind of getting close to zeroing in on this thing and landing the plane. I think Tim landed the plane and Martin's landing the plane. I'm still trying to figure out how to pull out of a dive. All right. So once again, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.